Hi, welcome everyone to our monthly gathering of fluoride-free activists. Fluoride-Free Campaigns meets every month to go through the 12 steps in the book, Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Water Fluoridation in Your Town. And today we're going to be focused on step 10. And it's all about allies, finding allies, collaborating with allies, aligning with allies. We fluoride-free activists, of course, have our issue, and we don't operate in a vacuum. We have, fortunately, people who are politically active and are working on issues that are in one way or another related to ending fluoridation. We could call them our cousins, if you will. And you know some of them, and they are active in your communities. And it's important to find those allies and get in communication with them. Sometimes they don't know the thing about fluoridation and they need a little education. Oftentimes they already do know about fluoridation, but hadn't prioritized it or hadn't thought about the synergies that could be developed between their campaign and yours. But reaching out to allies is clearly an essential step in building an effective campaign in your local area to end water fluoridation. And so what we'll do today, as we usually do every month, is I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a summary of the chapter from the book, Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Fluoridation in Your Town. And then we will talk with each other and share our experience with this topic, because we really want to keep people up to date with what's actually working and also those things that don't work so well. We can learn from each other. And so, yeah, any concrete examples you have about working with allies is going to be very relevant today. And then just whatever you want to talk about relating to ending fluoridation in your town. So let's get started with the topic for today, reaching out to allies. It's a big topic, and I know every single campaigner usually comes to the question, what do I do with allies in the first place? What's the best way to work with allies? And historically, it's been, for the most part, people have determined that working with campaigns that are focusing on other issues, for example, vaccination, 5G, the smart meters, other public health issues where the government is taking the authority and use its police powers to do what's quote unquote best for us. So people have often thought, well, wouldn't it be great if we all worked together? Oftentimes a very initial intuition, well, we all have so much in common, let's all work together. And that's a fine way to look at things. But it's also arguable that we want to keep ourselves distinct, so that when you go in to talk to an elected official, for example, and you want to talk about the end of fluoridation, there's ample information to talk about just on the one subject. And so that alone is a reason to keep it focused on the end of fluoridation. The other risk, as you may have experienced yourselves personally, is that you will sometimes risk getting the stereotypes that people have about, say, anti-vaxxers, or we have enough trouble with our own credibility and being called conspiracy theorists. And so when we broaden it to other topics or show that we have alignment or confederation with others, then we do run the risk of being categorized or pigeonholed based on the stereotypes or ideas that people have about that other subject. So actually, I would say that debate was like 50-50 up until the pandemic. The COVID pandemic, I think, shifted the argument more towards coming together, because what a lot of people have come to see is a broader pattern of public policy that isn't designed to help the average person, let alone protect some of the more susceptible subpopulations, but rather they're there to enhance profits by corporations and perhaps even worse. So because of that, people see a broader theme. And when someone sees a broader theme, you want to take advantage of that and have them see that fluoridation is really part and parcel of a kind of public policy that's gone awry. So that's a general discussion about allying with other groups. I guess I called them cousins before, but people who have, related topics and some overlap with what we do. In particular, however, there are people that every campaign should absolutely work to make bonds with and ask them to join your campaign, the foremost of which are dentists. So as you know, the the reason for the fluoridation is to help our teeth, and the Dental Association, broadly speaking, is one of the greatest pro-fluoridation voices. But there are many doctors and dentists who understand the holistic nature of the human body, and that poisoning our body with fluoridation chemicals by consuming them every day is not the way to help with the teeth. In particular, the IAOMT, the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. This outfit is a professional organization of dentists that is, you could say, the alternative to the American Dental Association or the Australian Dental Association. And they are holistic doctors, and they look at the big picture of what's healthy for their patients, and not just obsessing and focusing exclusively on the tooth. So when you reach out to dentists, I recommend that you reach out to every dentist in your area with an emphasis on the members of the IAOMT. Because when you get dentists on your side, it adds an enormous asset to your campaign, because again, the dentists in favor of fluoridation when they're the only ones talking, then it looks like it's just uniformly a good thing for oral health. But then these other dentists come in and they have the same credentials and they have the same credibility, and they can talk as well as the others about oral health, but they also are great about making sure people understand that there's more at stake than just oral health when you're talking about consuming a fluoridation chemical every day. So definitely get to know the dentists in your area. You're going to find some, of course, that are impossible to change their minds. We talk about this fair amount in the book, so you can read about the psychology of the dentist and the best ways to get them on the few that will join you, to get them on your team. And then there are other prospective allies to speak of. I mentioned a few in the health freedom arena. So again, public policy that is intended to help us, but in fact doesn't. 5G or other electromagnetic frequencies, that's a whole campaign where people are setting the alarm about the increase of exposure to electromagnetic radiation in our lives, and how little the government is doing to restrict the propagation of cell towers and cell phones that emit more and more radiation every year. And then you have, of course, the vaccine folks who, the vaccine realists or the vaccine hesitant, whatever the language you want to use, is people who are looking closely at the science and standing up for good health and patients' rights, in the sense that we all need to consent to medical treatment. So these are obvious allies. And so you want to reach out to them, at least get to know them. I say ultimately it comes down to you knowing your local area. In some local areas, it would be very advantageous to make strong bonds with these folks and work arm in arm. In other locales, you might be more successful, keep your activities more separate and just focus on fluoride. You're going to find out sometimes through trial and error, but again, by just looking at your community and judging for yourself what you think is going to be the best way. But even if you don't end up publicly collaborating together, to have relationships with them is going to be very helpful, because maybe you can share donors, or maybe you can share different kinds of resources. You don't have to make it public, but can benefit from working together in a lot of different ways. Another group of people are the Hispanic and African American. In our country, we have evidence that was once suppressed but became public through the Freedom of Information Act request a few years back. A valiant anti-fluoridationist, Dan Stockin, he found that the CDC was withholding information showing that African Americans and Hispanics are disproportionately affected by fluoridation in terms of the measure of dental fluorosis. And so when you bring that to political organizations in your area, who are dedicated to the rights of Hispanics and African Americans, you can oftentimes get their alliance. When we get to telling our own stories of our own personal experience in our campaigns, I want to tell you about my work with the NAACP here in San Francisco. And then I will conclude this brief summary of the chapter in the book, Something in the Water, 12 Steps Any Water Fluoridation, just by acknowledging that, yes, there are groups that you absolutely do not want to ally with. Again, it's going to be up to you in your local area to understand who these groups are, but you definitely don't want to risk your credibility, and you don't want to get involved with people who, this is all perception, right? So I'm not making any judgments exactly. I'm just saying that you need to use yourself some judgment, some discernment, we should say, about who you do ally with. And although it might even seem on the surface a good idea because you agree on the subject, you have to keep in mind the public perception. And that's very important when it comes to fighting fluoridation, because we're already starting behind with our credibility. So credibility is priceless, as we covered in the chapter called Win the Credibility War in Step 7. So, really analyze who you're going to ally with. When you do go to make an ally, it's something you develop over time. It's an investment in energy and time that you make that hopefully will, in the end, be worth the investment, that you will reap dividends for your campaign in having these alliances. And so you want to be careful not to torpedo your campaign by allying with folks that maybe in the public perception could hurt you. So that's a warning, of course, and it's a case-by-case situation, and I just encourage you to be judicious in your alliances, because you are going to be investing time and energy in them, and you want to make sure that you get the best bang for your buck. And for your ally as well, you want your ally to win as well. So if they're going to be investing time and energy working with you, you want to know that they're going to get more out of it than they put into it. So that's a good ally, isn't it, when you think about their winning as well as your winning. All right, so thanks for letting me do that bit summary of the chapter. I'm going to also quickly, if you don't mind, I'm going to take just a minute to review the steps that we've covered so far in this wonderful series this year, going through the 12 steps from the book. When we started step 1 back in January, we addressed the question of confronting the deception. So every activist has to be squarely resolved that there is a deception, and to have some way of understanding it for yourself that allows you to continue to be motivated and not disillusioned. And as you are successful in confronting the deception yourself, it'll make you more effective when you go to reach out to others, because they're going to have to confront the deception as well. And you want to be there to help them transit that uncomfortable period where they have to face the fact that, yes, the government, media, academia, industry, and others have colluded to keep this fraud alive. Very important first step. The second step is to protect yourself. So indeed, as long as fluoridation is still running through your water pipes, you want to do whatever you can do personally to reduce your exposure to this hazardous chemical. And in the process, you learn a few things about filtration and other ways to reduce your exposures that will help you when you're on the campaign trail address the questions that predictably, invariably, the people you meet will want to know. Okay, so it's no good for us, it's bad for us. Thanks for telling me about it, but what am I going to do to reduce my exposure? And you already become an expert to them and develop some credibility just knowing about some basic things they can do to reduce their exposure. And then step 3 is when we get involved in politics in earnest in the book. The first thing you want to do is map your jurisdiction. Every locality is different. The authority with which the utility or the health department uses to fluoridate your water is established usually in some because of law, whether it was through a mandate or through the ballot box because of a referendum. Maybe the city council voted it in. You need to know how your water came to be fluoridated in the first place. You need to understand where the water flows, what's the extent of your utilities fluoridation in your area, so you know the basics of the geography. and any kind of court cases that might have happened in your area. So you really want to be able to map your jurisdiction, because you need to know, and like with anything in life, you need to know the terrain that you're dealing with in order to be effective. Because then, yeah, when you get to step 4 is when we ask you to choose a pathway to victory. So in this chapter, we lay out the various broad avenues to ending fluoridation that are available, and you want to pick one. So it's either you're going to go to the ballot box with a referendum to end fluoridation, or you can also use the ballot box to run for office. But then there's the court system, and even though the courts have been tried a lot of times in the past, there still could be, for creative people, an avenue to use the courts to end fluoridation. You also have direct lobbying of your elected officials, which for many localities is the most cost-effective, the most direct way to end fluoridation, is to lobby your elected officials and have them pass legislation to end fluoridation and other things. And then finally, there's a whole collection of activities under an umbrella called direct action. So these are everything from, protests with signs to, it really is unlimited. It's whatever your creativity will allow. You can have events, musical events. You can have different things to draw attention to your campaign, and do it wisely. Do it in a way that people will be attracted to your campaign. You want to be, as leaders in your campaigns, actively choosing your pathway to victory and getting everybody on the campaign to follow that same pathway. Step 5 focuses on mastering the message. So this is all about communication, because in the end, you could see that a campaign is nothing more than a series of communications to elected officials, communications to your fellow residents, your neighbors, communications to donors, communications to people who want to volunteer, communications. So in this chapter, we break down how to be effective in communication. Keep your audience squarely in mind and your objective with that audience. So when you compose your message, you're very clear about what you're up to. There's a lot to say about fluoridation, and too often campaigners just fire hose people with a lot of information, and it's not effective. So you want to be able to focus your messaging on your objective and your audience. Step 6 is all about how to strategize, turning passion into action. Yes, everyone in your campaign wants to end fluoridation, but you're going to find very quickly that people have different ideas about how to get it done. It's a means to an end. And so in this chapter, we teach you the basics of strategizing according to dynamic strategizing, so that you keep it very fresh and alive and responsive to what's showing up in your campaign as you go along. But as you'll see, it's important to always be honest about what assets you hold, what behaviors you're capable of bringing to the campaign, and ultimately, what are the outcomes that those assets and behaviors are dedicated to. Really boils it down and keeps it really simple. And then step 8 is telling your story. What a great chapter that is. Your personal story may well be the greatest asset your campaign has. Each and every one of us has come to this battle, this mission to end fluoridation in some way or other, and they're as varied as there are people in your campaign. And so in that chapter, we teach you how to really communicate your personal story of what it was like before you learned about the problems with fluoridation, what happened to turn the light bulb on and have you see the truth, and then what it's like now that you know the truth. Because people are very suspicious of us, again, in terms of credibility. They want to know what your motivations are. They want to know what makes you tick. And even before they want to hear about, fluoridation's harmful effects on the body, they want to know, like, who is this person standing in front of me? So in that chapter, again, we teach you how to really nail that story in a really quick way so that people get the fullness of who you are, and they can trust you and like you and want to work with you. Step 9 is all about publicizing government secrets. You first do public records requests, right? You've heard of FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. I guess down under it's called the Right of Public Records, or Public Records Rights Act, or something like that. Every area has, oftentimes in like your city itself will have a sunshine clause, or your state or province will have its public records request legislation, which basically says that these public records belong to the public. That's why they're public records. And with some exception, that those public records must be made available to you upon request. And then in that chapter, we talk about some really interesting strategies, how to set up your government to reveal things about their attitudes, how much they spend on fluoridation, what they know or don't know about the harmful effects of it, and the records, the emails, the documents that they have that you get a hold of, and then you turn around and you publicize that to your town and your community, and people start to see the reality of how government works when it comes to this insidious practice. So today we're going to talk about reaching out to allies. I want to hear all about your stories. Next month is dedicated to don't give up, like not stopping. After 4+ years of monthly teleconferences with activists from all over the world, and that's the source of the material in the book, Something in the Water, there's one thing that I heard over and over again: don't quit. And this is absolutely the truth, because unfortunately, too many of us come to the campaigns to end fluoridation thinking it's going to be easier than it turns out to be. And too many people throw themselves at it thinking we should be able to get this out right away. It's so obviously bad and wrong and it's such bad policy, public policy. We surely should be able to end it. And then they find out there's more going on and oftentimes give up. So we are only going to end fluoridation if you can cultivate a staying power. And that's the step 11 is dedicated to. Step 12 is a very important activity in life, which is called visualization, where you foresee the future. You have to have a campaign that's future-based, that's forward-looking, that has an affirmative picture of the future that brings you into that future, that keeps you motivated and has everyone on your campaign aligned around a future where the fluoride is no longer in the water. So here we are together. You guys are the ones, thankfully, who are making a difference. You know, you are not going to learn about fluoridation and what it does to us, to our bodies and our health, and let that be okay. So we have all learned, if we campaign for a while, that not 100% of people are going to get on our campaigns, of course, because a lot of them actually support fluoridation for the reasons that they support it. But even amongst the people who want to end fluoridation, even we're not going to get 100% of them to be actively involved in your campaign. And it doesn't require 100% of them, thankfully. Because oftentimes the reason people don't get involved with their campaign is because they're involved with other campaigns that are, we could say, equally important, or at least in their minds. They discovered that maybe vaccines weren't so great, or maybe electromagnetic radiation's no good, or maybe they're fighting dioxins, from incinerators, or maybe, there are a lot of problems, and there's a lot of environmental problems. There are just a lot of health policy or public policy that is not great for the average person. So when you meet somebody who is politically active, you want to see them as a kin, as a brother or sister, because they are a minority of people who, when they see a problem, they want to do something about it. The question becomes then, as far as allies, how can you collaborate? How can you find a way to support each other and benefit from some synergies between you? And many of you have had those experiences in your local campaigns, and now's the time to share them. So who would like to talk about some alliances that you've made? Or even if you have tried to make alliances and it didn't go well, we want to learn about that as well. What kind of alliances have you made in your area to try to end fluoridation? Colin, yes, let's hear about your alliances.
I've been trying to make a few over the years. The latest one, which I think is significant, is a community-based organisation which was formed because of the COVID government overreach. Started in another state about 18 months ago, and now they've got over 175 local groups around Australia, called My Place Australia. Each state has anything up to 40 or more My Place groups in each state. We've only got 7 or 8 states and territories. In my local state, Queensland, there's about 40, and over half of them are in a fluoridated area. So I joined the local one. Just so happens the leader of this local one also doesn't pay her water bill. So anyway, I'm trying to get the word out to my places, and they all talk to each other, so that will spread the word of getting fluoride out of the water. Here in Queensland, it's a local council-based mandate, so it's much easier in Queensland to get it out. Most of the other states are all state mandates. Another type of ally is some of the political parties, more of the freedom-orientated political parties. There's a few out now that have policies of no fluoridation, banning fluoridation. They're only smaller ones, but they're a start. I noticed James Deal, he's an attorney. We have contacted solicitors, lawyers here in Australia, and some of them have acted against the COVID mandates and etc. And mostly got rejected by high courts, state high courts, but they did come up with a policy that some of these jabs mandates violate bodily autonomy. And they noted that fluoridation also violates bodily autonomy. And I'm hoping to get a few letters from them stating that as their legal opinion. So that's just a couple of allies I've been trying to cultivate.
Yeah, sensational. Notice how the underlying principle alignment is about finding the principle that you share. So it's not so much about the particular thing, even though it is about vaccinations, and vaccinations are very real, and the mRNA injection is very real. Hydrofluorosilicic acid is also very real. When you're aligning with these folks, you want to look for that principle that you share, because that's really what's motivating us anyway. And so bodily autonomy is the principle that you share with so many people. They will agree. And again, those people are active. These are the people who are already active, the people who created My Place Australia. These are people who understand that if we're going to make change, we have to do it through politics, and we have to get active, and we have to organize. So when you find people like that, you want to match their energy, and you want to meet them and find those places of alignment, and then start looking for opportunities to collaborate on specific projects. Let them know what your pathway to victory is for your campaign. Are you headed to the ballot, or are you headed to the courts, or are you focused on direct lobbying of your elected officials? Let them know what your strategies are so that they can easily find a place to plug in. They'll also let you know what they're up to, so you can find a way to collaborate.
With the other principle, as well as bodily autonomy, is informed consent.
Mm-hmm.
And when people bring up and call you, try to insult you by saying you're anti-vax, I just say, well, vaccines aren't put into the water supply. So it's completely apples and oranges. If they start putting vaccines into the water supply, I'll be anti-vax then, or pro-choice is the term.
Exactly. Consent and choice. Thank you. That's very well stated. Very well stated. And it's a great way to distinguish yourself in terms of, okay, vaccines are vaccines and fluoridation is fluoridation, but there's this underlying principle. Wonderful.
So in New Zealand now, the decision is made by the Director General of Health. It got transferred to him a year or two back, basically because we were so successful in persuading councils to stop or take out fluoridation. There were some other reasons, but that was the main reason. So what's happened since with COVID, a lot of individual freedom groups started up, and then they got together, not as one group, but just as a meeting place on Zoom to basically, effectively, and with a common website with links called New Zealand Rising. And so recently, as these vax mandates have started to come into force, fluoride mandates have started to come into force, the National Coordinator of Fluoride-Free New Zealand, Mary Byrne, who's not on the Zoom today, obviously, she started raising it in that forum. And the freedom movement in general has taken up the cause as being a key one in the wider campaign. The other thing that's happening is that the mandates are actually starting to hit, where councils are having to put fluoride in the water, ones who've already done so. But the costs are like tenfold what they originally thought. And the people are now starting to wake up now, like, hey, what the hell's going on with this crap going in our water? So Mary and another of the committee, Kane Titchener, have been running around the country doing talks and so on. They've been able to get the support of dentists and scientists and other health professionals who've held some quite senior positions in some cases to give talks, and those are really helping get the credibility issue that we always had, obviously.
Fantastic example. Wow.
Yeah. Now the other thing that's happening, some of you might or might not know, there's a group called New Health New Zealand, which is basically run by a single, very wealthy property developer. And he has a real passion for health issues. He helped keep the therapeutic goods bill out, the anti-vitamin bill, as we called it, back in 2017. And he also ran a court case against the decision to fluoridate a particular area of New Zealand. Now, I, being part of Fluoride-Free New Zealand for part of this issue since the 1970s, and also being a non-practicing lawyer, I was helping with that case. We got a pretty landmark decision that putting fluoride in the water is, for all practical purposes, compulsory medical treatment, which has gone against a lot of decisions around the world, especially one in Florida, I recall. So that was really good, and it's helped a lot with the COVID cases as well. That's been a precedent. But it was left really undecided whether it was a reasonable restriction on the right to freedom of medical treatment or choice. Here in New Zealand, our Bill of Rights Act gives this out, that you can restrict a right if it's reasonable to do so. So we've got another court case running at the moment, and again, I'm helping with that, challenging all of the Director General's decisions on the basis of major flaws in the way they were done. We've just had an initial hearing on the Bill of Rights issue, and we haven't had a reply. We think it might be that the judge didn't want to come out with his reply before the election in case it swayed the way people thought about the government. That's what we're thinking, but we're not sure. But it's due out any time. In terms of political parties, we have one party, New Zealand First, which just got back into Parliament with 8 seats last night. And they held up the fluoridation, this move for centralised direction and control. They held that up for the first 3 years they were in coalition with the Labor government from 2017 to 2020. And they have a policy of having a national referendum, which isn't what we want because it just gets swayed by political propaganda, as you'll all be aware. But they are certainly on our side as a political party.
Well, congratulations on that. I really want to see that national or law overturned.
The coalition partner for the National Party is now the ACT.
Yeah.
Well, I've looked at their website, and deep down you will find the ACT is a party that believes in an individual's freedom of choice and minimal government intervention.
So you think they'd be an ally for this, but they're not.
They're not. So they're hypocrites.
Yep.
So they oppose Labor's overreach for mandates on jabs, but they don't oppose the mandate on forced fluoridation.
Well, I'm not sure they actually oppose the mandates on jabs either, because they were amongst the people wanting to have people, military go into people's homes and hold them down and forcibly jab them.
Well,
all of the parties in Parliament were along that line, including National, which is now in power.
Well, it says here, Labor's legislative overreach led to mandates and ostracism and divisions.
True. Mm.
So they are hypocrites.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, interesting.
Well, thanks for underscoring that. When you're looking at allies, I guess we're learning that what they present themselves to be when it comes down to it. Fluoridation is somehow an exception, or doesn't, it's not consistent with their overall platform. And you might find that out the hard way. But don't be surprised based on what we're hearing from you two right now, Mark and Colin, that they might be hypocritical. They might not come through to support the end of fluoridation.
Well, Greens are an interesting example, because over your side of the world, they're leading the fight against fluoridation. Down here, they're right at the front supporting it. I think Australia's the same. They think it helps the poor, and they're all for the poor. So we've got to help these poor people by poisoning them with fluoride. That's their approach. They actually joined the party many years ago to try and get in and infiltrate it and bring about a change in fluoridation policy, but we ultimately got nowhere.
Yeah, it's not very green, because how many thousands of tons of toxic, contaminated fluoridation chemicals are added to the environment per year?
Yeah, well, they also support spraying a forest with 1080 poison.
Yeah, there's
Greens.
only two Greens parties in the world support fluoridation: New Zealand's Greens and Australia's Greens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's an ally, Ralph Nader and the Greens in America.
Right.
Are against fluoridation.
Very good. Yes. And to get a hold of your local party apparatus and talk to the committee chairman or whoever it is that runs the local committee, and see if you can do a presentation in front of them, because you guys, it's obviously great when there's a ready-made ally and there's just a yes from the get-go. That's wonderful.
We have MPs individual MPs that are opposed to fluoridation. We actually had a candidate in Hamilton here, and when it was revealed he was opposed to fluoridation, the party leader just silenced them.
Yes, no free speech. When you're in a political party, you have to toe the line.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting that at a local level, sometimes you have more influence, because, well, when you go into a committee room and you bring forth a very compelling presentation, you can educate people, you can sway them, because again, if you do share principles, underlying principles, and you focus on where you align on those principles, they'll start to see that to be authentic and to be consistent in their platform, that yes, they'll have to oppose fluoridation. So you just want to shepherd them through that process, through that realization. With any organization, you've got the top-down control. People at the top like to have control and get everyone in line, in lockstep. But presumably political organizations also have a bottom-up opportunity. So in the end, it's one conversation at a time, one presentation at a time, sometimes one person at a time. If you're lucky, you can get a whole committee or a whole group of people to get behind it. I'll share myself about how I did just that with the local chapter of the NAACP. It's a very old organization in the United States. It's very well known, and we were successful in getting their endorsement. They made a resolution to oppose fluoridation in particular. So what that looked like concretely was, well, I was motivated because I learned from Dan Stockin about not only the disproportionate harm to African Americans and Hispanics in terms of fluoridation harm as measured by dental fluorosis, and the cover-up by our Centers for Disease Control of that fact. I brought together, I just made a call. They meet on a monthly basis. I asked if I could come make a presentation. Myself and a colleague, Jay Sanders, who works for the Fluoride Action Network, who also lives here in San Francisco, we put together a slide presentation. We got there early, and we connected my computer to the big screen TV in the room. And when it was our time, we gave our presentation. It was very succinct, it was very brief, but it was very fact-based, and it was very profound in terms of people in that room were so moved, not only by again, the revelation of the disproportionate harm to their community, but how the government was attempting to cover it up. I've learned very well since then that the African American population is, how should I say this? This is not a foreign idea to them, that the government would would experiment on them or use covert means to try to affect our biology through various means. When we brought them that message, it resonated with what they already understood about politics and these kinds of government policies. So we prepared a very specific statement. Our ask, if you are, the outcome that we were seeking in that meeting was that they officially call for the city and county of San Francisco to stop fluoridation of our water. And so we crafted that statement for them to vote on. Someone made a motion, seconded it, and then they voted. And nearly everybody, I think, if not you, there's some people didn't vote at all, but everyone voted in favor of it. And so from that day on, now we have on our website, and we have when we go into the offices of our elected officials, we can say that the NAACP calls for the end of water fluoridation. And that has clout. That has in this town particularly, that has some weight. So that's a good example of an ally. Now, I will add that that same night they identified one of their members who happened to be a professional, young professional, to be like our point person to explore ways that we might collaborate beyond just them making a public statement. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. This person didn't. He went to do some more research himself. He was a super skeptical guy, which is, fine to be skeptical. But it was almost as if he himself personally became less convinced. So our partnership, like as a project together, didn't actually happen. And I tried following up with him again and again. He was also a very busy person. So that's the other thing, we're asking a lot of people in general, as you know, we're all busy. And it's a big ask to ask people to dedicate big portions of their day to ending fluoridation. So anyway, I just wanted to put that footnote in there as well. It was great to have, the win in terms of the public statement, but there wasn't a lot of action necessarily that followed from that. That's one example. More from Colin.
I mentioned to our state people in West Australia, there's an association of risk assessment people and toxicologists in Australia, and he's now written to them to ask them to see if any of them would want to do a risk assessment for fluoridation.
Oh.
Now, which has never been done, except maybe starting in America. Rangine and friends have done a risk assessment for developmental neurotoxicity, but they do risk assessments for lead, etc. So there'd probably be an equivalent in America. Yeah, Australian College of Toxicology and Risk Assessment. Sounds pretty good to me. A few years ago, the president of this association was in the fluoride advisory group to do a review of the government, which was a total whitewash again.
Great example. Thank you very much. Yes, these people would get it right away, you would think, right?
They should, but they probably get a lot of research money from the government.
Well, yes, as campaigners, we've learned over and over again that fluoride oftentimes is that exceptional chemical, the protected chemical. And the tentacles of the fluoridationists have found their way into all kinds of institutes and organizations and colleges of toxicology and risk assessment. So, go in with the greatest, my advice is go in with the greatest, vigor and with, positive outcomes, but be prepared to be surprised when they don't operate the way you would expect based on what they present.
Yeah, well, my advice for that is you use tactics of the FBI. You go in and say, you're smart and nice people, so let's talk how do we keep your reputation out of future trouble. Also, that was the Australasian College, so that includes New Zealand.
Yeah, so thanks. I wasn't aware of it.
This is one ally that you can absolutely count on, the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology has made great strides in advocating the end of fluoridation as a dental professional organization. They've written topic papers specifically on it, which is a great resource for every campaigner. You want to look for that. It's mentioned in the book, Something in the Water. So if you have these dentists in your area, you want to have them on speed dial. Make sure they're aware of your campaign and that they have ample opportunities to participate, whether you want to take them into the office of your elected official with you. It could be very helpful. You want to set up a debate between a holistic dentist and one of the pro-fluoridation dentists. That could be very much an event that would draw eyeballs.
There is a second association called the IABDM, Global Network of Biological Dentists, the International Academy of Biological Dentistry and Medicine, IABDM.
And how have you approached them?
They're active on Facebook, and I do comment on some of their posts, and they like some of my content, comments.
So because obviously dentists have a big question of whether to use fluoridation products in their practices in the office with the consent of their patient, and that ethically is something that is done. However, the question for me is, what is their stance on the mass medication through the water supply?
I think they're the same as the IAOMT. No fluoride, no mercury.
Wow, thank you very much for that resource. Okay, add that to your list, everybody. The other group of people we mentioned in the book is people who are chemically sensitive. They're more the more vulnerable groups. So kidney patients, right, on dialysis, people with autoimmune disorders like HIV and all the other myriad autoimmune problems. When it's been shown that these folks, they're particularly susceptible to fluoridation, to fluoride in their bodies, they're going to be motivated like other people are not. So that's another kind of group you want to look in your city. Here in San Francisco, the HIV patients are definitely looking hard at fluoridation as it specifically attacks the immune system through the bones, where the cells that help fight disease are generated. All right. Anyone else have a story about allies, working with allies you can share for us today?
Oh, Colin again.
What's that? Colin again. Yeah, sure. Colin's a wealth of information.
Another quick one. There's another association, the ACA, Australasian Corrosion Association. They've actually got a report out, and it quotes a friend of mine's anti-fluoride page. But they know fluoride will corrode public and private infrastructure, and they've got a report out about that.
All things corrosive.
Infrastructure, whether it's pipelines, oil pipelines, water pipelines, could be events.
Wonderful.
They mentioned fluoride a couple of times as being corrosive. But that was in Walbott's book. Also, a couple of references about corroding boilers and heaters and other equipment. It was proven to be corrosive. Send a bill for any corrosion you've got to your water supply. See if they pay it.
Yeah, it's all good. We're very much new kids on the block. Our town was supposed to be fluoridated this year, but because our council was a bit slow in getting their infrastructure in, it's been put off, fortunately, till the middle of next year. So we are trying to publicise the fact that we are getting fluoridation. Our local paper is useless because they, of course, government paid propaganda, basically. They had one article on it where our mayor raved on about how wonderful fluoridation was, because that's what the Ministry of Health had told him. We are fortunate in that we are heavily involved in it's a national, what would you call it? Freedom group called Voices for Freedom. And we are actually the coordinators for our local group. So we're going to use our members as an initial base to get some support, and we've got a couple of people who are very passionate about it at this stage. We've also, with the cooperation of Mary Byrne from Fluoride-Free New Zealand, we're going to go all out and hold a public meeting towards the end of next month, which we will publicise through our group and just through social media. We decided that delivering flyers, we put out 3,000 flyers and got one response. So now that our elections are over and we now have a new government to bash into place, hopefully we can now start to focus on getting this fluoride message out. We've got to decide whether VFF is actually, it's going to be part of their agenda or not. Whether it is or not, we need to go ahead. So motivate our people to say, look, do you want to be poisoned?
Well, very good. I would take the time to recommend the book, again, Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Water Fluoridation.
Yes.
The chapter about messaging. If you're getting that kind of results from your messaging, maybe there's something off in terms of your understanding of your objective and your audience and the composition of your message. You could benefit from that chapter very much. Everyone can. It's something that it's a lifetime practice, really a lifetime pursuit to get really good at communicating. I've been coaching and training people in communications since 1997, professionally. And there are certain principles. And in that chapter, I wanted to make it very simple for the campaigner. So I boiled it down to the most essential elements that directly impact your ability to make a difference with the audience that you're up to. Everything's a communication, right? Even this right now, I'm communicating, and my audience is you, right? The dedicated fluoride-free activists who sees a need to maybe improve their results in their communications. My objective is to get you to learn the principles that are communicated in the book, and so my message is the one you're hearing right now, specifically dedicated to you. And I hope I'm effective. Yeah, it's good to see you. Are you together? Are you a couple?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
I'm Alan. This is Raywin.
Yeah, say hi.
Hi.
Glad to have you. Glad to have you. Hope to see you again in the next couple months as we finish off this series of 12 months corresponding with the 12 steps in the book.
Yeah.
Great.
Lovely.
I'm glad to hear you're aligning with the Voice of Freedom. That's wonderful.
Yes. Wonderful organisation.
It's the principle of freedom that matters, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. The government, someone was saying about the legal aspect and the idea of rights, and how there's just too many people in positions of power who are actively trying to carve away our rights, to just keep restricting them and keep giving justification and reasons why, well, it's a right, but it's not a full right. And, you can't expect to have all your freedoms and because of this, that, and the other thing. And so we need to provide the other voice. In fact, we need to, in my assessment, we need to err on the side of freedom, that if there's a doubt, you go on the side of freedom. And it takes a lot of faith in humans, because given freedom, what are we going to do with our freedom? Are we going to do good? Or are we going to do evil? So let's be free. But there are laws, that we can't harm each other. Correct? Being free doesn't mean you get to do anything and everything. There's still a natural law that says we should not harm one another. We may not harm one another without consequences. So we're just talking about freedom to drink water that is bereft of a medication. It's that simple. So thank you. Thank you for everything you do there. Thanks. Thank you. New Zealand and Australia are wonderful places. You guys are really great examples, really inspiring.
Fluoride.
What's that, Colin?
That's fluoride.
It's fluoride?
Naturally calcium fluoride.
Calcium fluoride?
Yes.
Is it in
crystal?
It's a crystal.
Yes.
And it's
lovely colours, of fluorescent type colours.
Huh.
Can I stick this into somebody?
Would you grind it up and put it in my water, please? I don't have enough of it in my life.
It's not very soluble.
Oh,
Why they
good.
don't, although they put it in our law, state law, to allow blending of natural fluoride with other
The synthetic silicates.
Uh,
All right, folks. Well, I'm so appreciative that you all made it today. Allies are the folks that will amplify our campaigns. Again, they're people who get it. Getting political is what changes public policy. If your experience is like mine, the challenge isn't only to get people to see that the fluoridation policy is bad, 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 but to get people to embrace politics, just to embrace getting political, being political. People are so cynical about politics. They're so resigned about politics. If you find people who are already active, those are the ones you want to partner with. Where are you from, William?
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Okay. And how's it going there?
Well, I don't think fluoridation is on the top of the list at the moment. Carjacking and well, those kinds of crimes are more immediate, I guess.
Well, as long as I've been
of
fighting fluoride since 2012 actively, I haven't seen fluoridation be in the top 10, issues that we're supposed to be concerned about. There's always a parade of issues, the outrage of the week, the trendy topic that we're supposed to be involved with, and they're real. I mean, like car break-ins in our city here where I live are very real. We have, upwards to 50,000 reported every year. So it's not that these other issues don't exist. It's just we as fluoride-free activists have to find a way to break through the noise and to get people to focus on the fact that they're being poisoned every single day through the drinking water.
Yeah, I just discussed it with my brother. We were talking about health, and I said, well, don't drink fluoride. He said, I don't. And he says, you already told me that. So
Good.
I got into this about 2014. I took a class at a local university, and they wanted us to write a paper on a controversial environment issue. So I chose fluoride, and right away, I think I read the book from the Englishman who calls it a fraud. Fluoride is a fraud. Or not sure he phrased it that way, but similarly.
Bryson's Fluoride Deception.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that was my introductory to the fluoride deception.
Yes, the history and the politics that began the fraud and it continues in deception. Yes.
Yeah, good book.
Required reading. It's in 12 Steps to Ending Fluoridation, Something in the Water. I definitely recommend 2 books as essential for all campaigners. That's that one, and the Deception, Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson, which chronicles the history and the politics that got it going in the propaganda period. And then as far as the biology, I recommend Dr. Conant's Case Against Fluoride. That will teach everybody everything you need to know about the effects of fluoride in and around the body. Between those two, you're set, and then it's just game on. And all that matters now is, what are you going to do about it? How are we going to get this stuff out of the water? Well, the next month's topic, Don't Give Up, is more of a psychological topic. It's a tough fight, and many of us have been in it for many years. And the only difference between those who are going to be around when it ends and those who gave up is you just decided not to quit. Whatever happens, whether you're disappointed by the results of any particular project or initiative, whether you make the mistake of burning yourself out by just really throwing yourself at it and not balancing your life, these are the kinds of topics that we discuss. We've got to have you in the battle until the end. We can't have you bailing out because you've stressed yourself out or because you've gotten disappointed. We can't have you, stressing yourself out unnecessarily. We've got to keep you in the fight and grow our numbers. So That's why the chapter is called Don't Give Up. I've been with many of you for many, many, many years. So you will have a lot to say personally about what do you do? I want to learn from you. I want everyone to learn from you, your personal strategies about how you keep going despite not ultimately succeeding yet. How is it that you keep in the game? How do you keep in the fight? It's a personal experience, and it's very real. And so I think the wisdom from many of you is going to be very valuable to share with others. And you might save somebody's life down the road, in the sense that they may not make the mistakes that they would have otherwise made. One last chance. If there's anything you want to share, go ahead and open your mic and do that now.
Don't pay your water bill. Complain and don't pay your water bill.
Don't pay your water bill. Water bill protest. I love it. Okay, everyone.
Thanks, Glenn.
God bless you all.
Thank you very much.
Go forth.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
All right. Goodbye.